My dad has the same bike as yours. 5 words, spoken by a girl who had no idea what she was holding. The biggest man at the table, leather jacket, gray beard, eyes like old storm clouds, stopped breathing. Not for a second, for a full suffocating moment. Because those 5 words didn't just open a memory. They cracked open 15 years of silence, 15 years of guilt, 15 years of a man the Hells Angels had buried alive and left there. If this story already has you hooked, hit subscribe, drop a comment with the city you're watching from, and ride with us all the way to the end. Let's see how far this story travels. The storm hit Montana the way it always does in late November, without warning and without mercy. One moment the highway was gray and cold. The next it was white. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the wind came screaming sideways off the Rockies like it had a personal grudge against every living thing still out on the road. 4 motorcycles, heavy, loud, black, had been pushing through that storm for 2 hours before Grim Malone finally raised his fist and signaled the others to pull off. No one argued. When Grim raised his fist, you pulled off. That was the law. They found the diner almost by accident, a small, low building, set back from the highway, with a neon sign that buzzed and flickered in the wind. Half the letters were burned out. What remained read up on Lark's Open. The parking lot was mostly empty. A rusted pickup, 2 older sedans, and now 4 Harleys that growled to silence one by one. Grim was the first one off his bike. He stood in the parking lot for a moment, letting the snow hit his face, his beard, his jacket. He was 61 years old, built like something that had been hit repeatedly and simply refused to break. His hair was iron gray. His hands were the size of small shovels, and his eyes, pale, almost colorless blue, had a way of scanning a room before he'd even walked into it, like a man who'd learned a long time ago that every room had something in it worth preparing for. Behind him came Stone, real name Gerald Briggs, a former mechanic from Billings, who'd been riding with the club since he was 22 and was now pushing 58. Then came Dust Raymond Ochoa, lean and quiet with a long gray braid down his back and a tattoo on his neck that he'd stopped explaining to people 15 years ago. And last came Rook, youngest of the 4, at 54, though he didn't look it, his face carrying enough miles to belong to a man 20 years older. 4 men, decades of road between them, and a silence that had grown so familiar over the years that none of them really noticed it anymore. They just carried it the way you carry a scar. You stop feeling it, but it's still there. They pushed through the diner door together. A small bell announced them. The warmth hit like a wall, coffee and bacon grease and something sweet. Maybe pie. 3 booths along the window, a counter with spinning stools, a laminated menu taped to the wall behind the register. 2 locals at the far end of the counter looked up, saw the leather, the patches the size of these men, and found something very interesting to look at in their coffee cups. Smart. The 4 of them took the largest booth. Nobody offered to seat them. They just moved to it like they owned it, the way men like them move anywhere with the quiet certainty of people who have stopped asking permission for things. A moment passed, then footsteps, and a voice. "Hey there, welcome to Lark's. You boys braved the storm or just real stubborn?" She was young, mid-20s maybe, with blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and blue eyes that were quick and direct and completely unbothered by the 4 large, road-hardened men now occupying her biggest table. She had a notepad in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, and she moved with the easy, efficient energy of someone who'd been working this job long enough to have no remaining illusions about it, but hadn't yet started resenting it. Her name tag said Lily. "Little of both," Grim said. His voice was low, the way all big men's voices tend to settle, not loud, not trying to be anything. Just there like a weight placed on a table. Lily smiled at that, not a polished customer service smile. A real one, quick and a little crooked. "Coffee?" she asked, already turning the cups right side up without waiting for an answer. "4, said Dust. "Menus." "We'll take whatever's hot," said Stone. "That's the special then. Beef stew, cornbread, apple pie, if you want it." She started pouring. "You guys riding through or stopping somewhere around here?" "Just stopping," Grim said. She nodded like that was all the answer anyone ever needed. Around here, it usually was. She brought the food. She kept the coffee coming. She didn't hover, didn't flirt, didn't ask questions she didn't need answers to. It was good service in the old-fashioned way, present, when needed invisible, when not. The kind of service that comes from actually paying attention to people rather than performing attention at them. For a while, the four of them ate in the particular silence of men who are comfortable enough with each other that conversation is optional. Outside, the storm continued its argument with Montana. Inside, the diner held steady, warm and dim and smelling like something close to home. It was Stone who started talking first. He usually did eventually. Stone had never learned to be comfortable with silence the way the others had. "You know what this reminds me of?" he said, wrapping both hands around his mug. "That diner outside Butte. What was it, the Blue Moon, Silver Moon?" Dust said without looking up. "Silver Moon, yeah." Stone leaned back. "We stopped there one night in, God, what year was that? 89, 90. 91, Rook said. It was 91 because Jack had just bought the Softail. The name fell into the middle of the table like a stone dropped into still water. Jack. Nobody moved. Nobody immediately responded. The way nobody responds when something gets said that wasn't supposed to be said when a name gets spoken, that everyone agreed without ever discussing it to leave unspoken. Rook realized it a half-second too late. He looked down at his stew. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I don't know why I said that." "Don't worry about it," Grim said. His voice was flat. Not angry, just shut. And that was it. The conversation closed. Stone looked at the window. Dust poured more coffee from the pot Lily had left on the table. Rook stirred his stew without eating it. The name sat in the middle of them like something none of them knew how to pick up. Jack Morgan. Lily came back around 10 minutes later to check on them. She topped off the coffee, Grim's first, Stone's second, then Dust and Rook, and she was about to head back to the counter when her eyes landed on the row of bikes visible through the window, the snow collecting on their seats. She stopped. "Those yours?" she asked. Not nervous, genuinely curious. "Yeah," Stone said. "The Softail Deluxe out front, that's a beautiful machine. I'm sorry about the snow on it." She smiled again. "My dad has the same bike." Grim looked up. It was the way he looked up, not quickly, not obviously, just a slight shift of his eyes from the table to her face that was the first thing Stone noticed. Because Grim didn't look up for things. Grim sat through most conversations like a mountain sits through weather unmoved, present uninterested. But something in those words made him look. A Softail Deluxe. Grim's voice was careful, controlled. "Yeah, well, he had one. He doesn't ride much anymore." The smile stayed, but something shifted under it. "He used to ride all the time when I was a kid. He'd take me out on it sometimes. Had to be maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I'd sit right in front of him and he'd go real slow, and I thought we were going 100 miles an hour. A small laugh. "I still think about that." "He give it up?" Stone asked. Casual, trying to keep it casual. "More like he just stopped," she said. "After my mom passed, he kind of stopped a lot of things." There was a pause. The kind nobody fills because there isn't anything to fill it with that doesn't sound wrong. "I'm sorry about your mom," Dust said. "Thank you." She meant it. You could tell. "It's been a few years now. He's still..." She stopped, started again. "He's still working through it." She reached to collect a couple of empty cups. And then so naturally it barely registered as a question at all, she said, "Do you guys ride with a club?" "My dad used to know some guys in a club, said they were the best people he'd ever met." Stone said, "We do, yeah." And she smiled that real crooked smile, and she said, "He'd love to know that. He always said the road was better with brothers." Grim's jaw was tight. "What club was he with?" Grim asked, and his voice was so carefully neutral that Stone glanced at him sideways. "Oh, he doesn't really talk about it much anymore." She tilted her head. "I know it was a long time ago, before everything." She looked out at the bikes again. "His name's Jack Morgan. If you ever passed through this part of Montana back in the day, maybe you ran into him. He was pretty well known around here," he said. The diner went quiet, not figuratively, literally, because Stone stopped breathing, because Dust's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth and stayed there, because Rook made a sound small, involuntary, barely a sound at all, and then pressed his lips together hard. And because Grim Malone, who had not visibly reacted to anything in years, who had walked through some of the hardest moments of his adult life without breaking stride, went completely, utterly still. Lily noticed. She was perceptive, this girl. Too perceptive, maybe. What? She said, not alarmed, just reading the table. Jack Morgan, Grimm said, each word deliberate. Rode a Harley Softail, knew a club, from around here. Yeah. Now she was more careful. Something in his voice had changed. That's him. Do you know who he is? Oh. Grimm looked at her for a long moment. And in that moment, Stone watched his old friend's face do something he hadn't seen in a very long time. Something that cracked through the leather and stone expression Grimm wore like armor. Something that looked from the outside uncomfortably close to pain. Yeah, Grimm said. We know Jack. Lily set down the cup she'd been holding. She pulled her notepad into her hands and held it there, not writing, just holding it. A thing to hold. You're serious, she said. We're serious, Stone said. How do you? She stopped. Then were you guys in his club? He was in ours, Grimm said, a long time ago. She looked at each of them in turn, one face, then the next, then the next. Reading them the way her father had probably taught her to read people, quickly, honestly looking past the surface for what was underneath. He never told me your names, she said. He never really told me much about any of it. I always figured it was just, she paused, that it was a time he didn't want to talk about. It's complicated, Rook said, and the quiet misery in his voice said that is the understatement of several lifetimes. Lily pulled up a chair from the empty table beside them, just dragged it over and sat down, like this was now a conversation that required sitting. Like she had decided in approximately 10 seconds that whatever was in this booth mattered more than the other two customers at the counter. Tell me, she said. Not can you tell me, not would you mind, just tell me. Stone almost smiled. She had her father's directness. He remembered that about Jack, the way Jack could walk into a room and cut straight to the thing that mattered. No performance, no preamble. It's a long story, Grimm said. I've got a slow shift, Lily said. A beat. Then Stone said, your dad ever tell you why he stopped writing? My mom died, she said immediately. He kind of fell apart after that. Before that, Stone said, a long time before that. You know why there was a gap in his life, why he wasn't around for a few years when you were real young. Lily's expression shifted, carefully. He told me he had some legal trouble. That was the word he used. Trouble. He didn't go into it. Legal trouble, Dust said quietly. And the way he said it, the weight in it made Lily lean forward slightly. What kind of trouble? She asked. Grimm was the one who answered. He looked at his coffee cup. He turned it once in his hands. And then he looked at her directly the way men look at you when they are about to say something real, something they have been not saying for a very long time. The kind of trouble, Grimm said slowly, that wasn't his. Silence. Lily's face went very still. What does that mean? Stone picked it up from there because Grimm had clearly used up whatever he had available right then. Your dad took a fall for the club, federal charge, something that was going to land on several of us, maybe put 2 or 3 of us away for years. And Jack, he stopped, cleared his throat. Jack stepped in front of it. He said it was him, said he acted alone, and the charge stuck. Lily stared at him. He went to prison, Stone said, for something he didn't do, for something that wasn't only his, Stone corrected carefully. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that the only sound in the diner was the wind outside and the low country song leaking from a speaker somewhere in the back. How long? She finally said. 4 years, Grimm said. He did 4 years. Lily closed her eyes just for a second, then opened them again. I was 4 when he went away, she said. My mom told me he had to go work somewhere far away. I didn't understand until I was older. She looked at Grimm. She never told me the real reason. She probably didn't know the whole thing, when Grimm said. Jack protected a lot of people from a lot of things. That was his way. And when he got out, Lily's voice was still steady, but barely. What happened when he came home? This was the part that nobody wanted to say. This was the part that had been sitting inside all 4 of them like broken glass for 15 years, sharp and shifting and impossible to ignore and impossible to reach. Stone looked at Dust. Dust looked at the table. Grimm answered. We failed him, Grimm said. Just like that. No softening, no qualifier. We were supposed to be there. When he got out, we were supposed to be there and we weren't. Life happened. The club drifted. Some guys moved on. Some guys had their own problems. And Jack, he stopped, started again. Jack came home to a wife who'd been holding everything together alone for 4 years, and to a club that had gone quiet, and to a daughter who barely remembered him. He paused, and we told ourselves we'd call, we'd visit, we'd get back to him. And Lily said, and we didn't, Grim said. Months turned into a year turned into 5. And by the time any of us thought seriously about reaching back, it felt like too much time had passed. Like it was too late. Like reaching out would just remind him of everything he'd lost. His voice was rough. That's the lie we told ourselves, that we were protecting him by staying away. Lily looked at him for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was very quiet and very clear, and it landed on all 4 of them like something physical. When my mom got sick, she said my dad had nobody. Not an accusation, worse than an accusation. A fact. I know, Grim said. He sat in that hospital every single day for 11 months, and he had nobody. She wasn't crying. She was past that. Whatever she'd felt in those months had been processed into something harder and colder. He called me every night, but I was in Billings, finishing school, and I couldn't always get home. And he never complained. He just said, I'm fine, Lily. Your mom's good. Get your schoolwork done. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Your mom, when did she pass? Dust asked. 3 years ago. She looked down at her notepad. March. He's been out here since then. The house she grew up in. He said he couldn't leave it. She looked up. He doesn't ride. He barely leaves. I come out here to see him twice a week and bring groceries, and he's fine. He's always fine, but he's not fine. Anyone can see it. The 4 of them were very still. He's here, Grim said. Close. 7 minutes down Route 12, she said. The old Delaney property. He bought it with my mom 20-something years ago. 7 minutes, 15 years of silence in 7 minutes. Grim looked at Stone. Stone looked back at him. Dust and Rook were both watching Grim the way people watch something they're not sure is going to explode. Does he know you're here? Grim asked. Tonight, I mean. Working. He knows where I work, Lily said. He doesn't know about you. He doesn't know you're in this diner. She tilted her head. Should I tell him? Grim looked at his hands, those large scarred, road-worn hands that had built things and broken things, and in the accounting of his life, had probably done both too many times. No, he said finally. Lily waited. Not yet, Grim said. So they stayed another hour. Lily refilled coffee twice more and left them mostly alone, but occasionally she drifted back not to serve, just to be near. Like she'd decided these 4 strangers were now part of something she was supposed to stay close to, at least for tonight. Stone talked the most, which was not unusual. He told Lily small things about Harassment, the way Jack had always been the first one up at camp, the way he'd known every back road in a 3-state area from memory, the way he'd once ridden 40 miles in a hailstorm to get to a brother who'd gone down on the highway and then denied it was any kind of sacrifice at all, just said, that's what you do. Each story Lily received with complete total attention. The way you receive something you have wanted for a very long time and are afraid might disappear if you look away. He doesn't talk about the old days, she said at one point. I always thought maybe it was painful. But I didn't know how much. I didn't know the half of it. He's a proud man, Dust said. Doesn't want to be a burden. I know, she said. That's the problem. Rook had been quiet most of the night, more than usual, which for Rook was saying something. But at one point, he looked at Lily with an expression that was so openly miserable, it was almost hard to look at. How is he? Rook asked. Really, underneath the fine. Lily considered the question seriously, like she was deciding how much truth these men had earned. He's disappearing, she said. Slowly. I don't mean he's not sick, not physically, but it's like every year there's a little less of him, a little less light. He sits on the porch in good weather, and he watches the road, and sometimes I catch him looking at the garage where the Harley is, and his face does something just for a second, and then it stops. She paused. Like he remembers something, and then decides to forget it again. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Grim pushed back from the table. He stood up, all of him, and Stone and Dust and Rook all watched him the way you watch a mountain do something unexpected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. pulled out enough bills to cover the food and the coffee 3 times over, and put them on the table. "Thank you," he said to Lily, "for the food." And then after a beat, "And for the rest of it." She stood up too. She held his gaze without flinching. Her father's eyes, he thought. Whatever shade they were, there was the same directness in them, the same refusal to look away. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Grim was quiet for a moment. "What we should have done 15 years ago," he said. She held his gaze a moment longer, searching. Whatever she found there must have been enough. "He chains the door," she said quietly. "Deadbolt and chain. Has to buzz to get in." "We'll knock," Grim said. "He won't answer." "We'll knock anyway." She looked at him one more time, then she reached into the pocket of her apron and wrote something on her notepad and tore off the page and handed it to him. "My number," she said, in case anything happens, or in case you need me there." Grim folded the paper once and put it in his jacket pocket. "He raised a good daughter," he said. And something in Lily's face cracked just slightly, just for a second, and then she pulled it back, stood straight, nodded. "He raised me to look out for the people I love," she said. "That's what I'm doing." Grim nodded. The four of them walked out into the storm. The cold hit immediately, massive and indifferent. They stood at the bikes for a moment, snow piling on their shoulders, their helmets, the seats of their Harleys. Stone said, "It's late." "I know," Grim said. "We don't even know for sure." "It's him," Grim said. Stone closed his mouth. "Jack Morgan," Grim said almost to himself. 7 minutes down Route 12. He looked at the road, at the storm, at 15 years of silence, sitting between this diner and that house like a distance that had nothing to do with miles. He swung his leg over the bike. "Let's ride," he said, and they followed him. Because they always followed him, and because even if they hadn't, there was nowhere else to go tonight that would have mattered. Look, 7 minutes, 15 years, and a daughter who said 5 words that changed everything. Route 12 in a Montana snowstorm at 11 o'clock at night is not a road that forgives mistakes. The asphalt disappears under white, the lane markers vanish, and the only things keeping you alive are your instincts, your tires, and whatever stubborn faith you still have in the idea that the road continues even when you can't see it. Grim rode point. He always rode point. The other 3 fell in behind him. Stone on his left flank, Dust and Rook staggered back the way they'd ridden together for 30 years. The formation so practiced, it didn't require thought anymore, just the body remembering what the mind no longer needed to direct. 7 minutes, Lily had said. It took 12 in the storm. But they found it. An old farmhouse set back from the road with a gravel drive that had gone mostly to weeds in the warmer months and was now just a white channel between 2 lines of fence posts. One light on inside upstairs behind a curtain. The garage sat separate from the house slightly off to the right. A heavy padlock on the garage door. Old paint on the house peeling at the corners. A porch with 2 chairs on it, both covered in snow. Nobody lived here the way people live in places they're proud of. This was the way people lived when surviving was the whole project. Grim cut the engine. The others followed. The silence after 4 Harleys go quiet is its own kind of loud, the storm filling in the space, the wind working at everything it could find. "You sure about this?" Rook said. He wasn't challenging, he was genuinely asking. "I'm sure we're here," Grim said. "That's all I'm sure of." He walked to the front door. The porch boards creaked under his weight. He raised his fist and knocked 3 times solid, the kind of knock that says, "I'm not going away." Nothing. He knocked again. A long moment passed, long enough that Stone, standing at the base of the porch steps, started to think maybe Jack was asleep. Long enough that Dust shifted his weight and looked at Rook, and Rook looked at the upstairs window where the light was still on. Then a sound, movement inside. The slow, deliberate movement of someone who is not rushing to the door, because rushing to the door is something they stopped doing a long time ago. Then a voice. Low, rough, careful. "Who's there?" Grim felt it in his chest, that voice. 15 years older. Rougher at the edges, but unmistakable. Absolutely, completely unmistakable. "Jack," Grim said, "just the name." "Nothing else?" Silence. A long, terrible silence. Then who was that? Not a question. A demand. The voice had sharpened, instantly shifted from tired caution to something harder. "It's Grim," Grim said. Another silence. This one different from the first. This one had something alive in it, something that was either recognition or fury or both. Grim Malone. Jack's voice came through the door, flat and unreadable. You're telling me Grim Malone is standing on my porch? Yeah. In the middle of a blizzard. Yeah. A pause. You lost? And despite everything, despite the weight of the moment, the years, the guilt sitting on all four of them like something physical. Stone almost laughed, because that was Jack. Even now, even after everything, the first thing out of his mouth was a dry line delivered so perfectly straight, you weren't sure for a half second if he meant it. No, Grim said. We're not lost. Then what the hell do you want? To talk. Another silence. Longer this time. It's been 15 years, Jack said. I know. 15 years, Grim, and now you're at my door at 11 at night in a snowstorm. I know. That's all you've got, I know. For right now, Grim said. Yeah, that's what I've got. The silence stretched, and then the sound of a chain, a deadbolt, and the door opened. Not all the way, a foot, maybe a foot and a half, enough to see him. Jack Morgan was 63 years old, and he looked like someone had taken the man. Grim remembered a big, broad, laughing man who'd filled every room he walked into and drained about 40% of him out. He was thinner than he should have been. The gray in his hair was complete now, and his beard was long and unkempt in a way that said he'd stopped caring about it rather than choosing to grow it. But his eyes were the same. Dark brown, sharp, and right now burning with something that Grim could not quite read from where he stood, but that did not look in any way like welcome. He looked at Grim, then past him at Stone, at Dust, at Rook standing in the snow. All four of you, Jack said. All four of us, Grim pled. Jack looked at them for a long moment. His jaw worked. Something moved through his face, something complicated and layered and too fast to track completely. Then he said, come in. And he turned and walked back into the house and left the door open behind him. The inside of the house was warm. That was the first thing. A wood stove in the corner of the front room burning low. A couch that had seen better decades. A coffee table with a mug on it and a paperback lying face down, spine cracked. A lamp, a rug that had once been nice. Photographs on the walls. A woman dark-haired laughing in most of them. A young girl in some. Lily clearly at various ages. But no photos of bikes, no photos of the club, no photos of anything before the woman. Like the first half of his life had been carefully removed. Jack stood in the middle of the room and turned to face them. He didn't offer seats. He didn't offer coffee. He just stood there with his arms folded and looked at them the way a man looks at people he's been rehearsing a conversation with in his head for years now that they're actually here, and the rehearsal doesn't seem like enough. How'd you find me? He said. Your daughter, Grim said. Something flickered in Jack's face. Lily. She's working the diner on Route 9. She mentioned your name. She mentioned it, or you asked her. She mentioned it, Grim said. We were just stopping out of the storm. She described her dad's bike. Said his name. He paused. We didn't go looking for you, Jack. Not tonight. But here we are. Jack looked at him steadily. And what does that mean? Here we are. What does that fix? Nothing, Grim said. Yet. Yet! Jack's voice went hard. You walk in here after 15 years and you say yet like there's some kind of timeline here. Like this is something that can be fixed with a conversation and some good intentions. I'm not saying it can be fixed in a conversation. Then what are you saying? Because I'm standing in my living room at 11 o'clock at night and you're here and I have no idea what you want from me. I don't want anything from you, Grim said. I came to give you something. What? Grim was quiet for a moment. An apology, he said, for a start. Jack stared at him. Then something happened that none of them were quite prepared for. Jack laughed. Not a happy laugh, not even close. It was the kind of laugh that has nothing to do with humor and everything to do with disbelief, with the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something for so long that the idea of it finally being acknowledged lands not as relief, but as a kind of bitter absurdity. An apology, Jack said. 15 years, Grim. I know. When Carol was sick, he stopped, started again. Do you know what that's like? Do any of you know what that is? To sit in a hospital and watch someone you love disappear day by day, and to reach for your phone and scroll through your contacts and realize, his voice went rough, realize that everyone you would have called, everyone you thought you could call, had gone quiet so long ago that calling them would feel like calling strangers. Stone looked at the floor. I didn't call because, I didn't know what to say, Stone said quietly. That's the truth, Jack. I picked up the phone 100 times and I put it down because I couldn't find the right words, and eventually I ran out of time to look for them. 100 times, Jack repeated. The flatness in it was devastating. 100 times. I know it doesn't. No, Jack said, it doesn't. He looked at Stone, at Dust, at Rook, who was standing slightly behind the others with an expression of such open misery that it looked almost wrong on his face, like a mask that didn't fit. Then back to Grim. I needed you, Jack said. After everything I did for this club, I'm not saying it to hold it over anyone. I'm saying it because it's a fact. After everything I gave up for you, for all of you, I needed you. And you weren't there. You're right, Grim said. Jack blinked, like he'd expected argument, like he'd prepared for pushback, and the agreement was somehow harder to absorb than resistance would have been. We were cowards, Grim said, all of us. We convinced ourselves we were staying away to give you space, that we were protecting you. But the truth is, we didn't know how to face what we'd let happen to you, and instead of figuring it out, we just stayed gone. He looked at Jack directly, unflinching. I will spend the rest of my life knowing that I failed you when it mattered most. That's mine to carry. I'm not here to put it down. I'm here because it's 15 years overdue, and I'm done letting it stay that way. The room was very quiet. Jack's jaw was tight. His eyes were bright, not with tears, not quite, but with the pressure of something that had been held down for a very long time and was now pushing hard against whatever was holding it. Why now, Jack said. Why tonight? Because of Lily. Because running into her in a diner made you feel guilty. What happens when the guilt fades? Grim. What happens in 6 months when the road calls and you ride out and the silence starts again? Because I can't. His voice broke, just slightly, just for a second. I can't do that again. I can't have people back in my life and then lose them again. I don't have enough of me left for that. And there it was, the thing underneath the anger. The real thing, not rage fear. The fear of a man who had already lost everything he'd built and couldn't afford to build again, only to lose it a second time. Rook stepped forward. Rook, who had barely spoken all night. Rook, who was the youngest of them and had the least claim to any kind of authority in this room, who had every reason to stay quiet and let Grim handle it. Jack, Rook said, I was 24 when it happened. When you took that charge, I was 24 years old and I didn't understand what you were giving up. Not really. I thought I did, but I was a kid and I didn't. He stopped. I've had 30 years to understand it. 30 years to figure out what it means that you walked into that and you didn't flinch, and that we should have that. I should have spent every one of those 30 years making sure you knew it mattered. His voice was unsteady. I'm sorry, man. I am genuinely deeply sorry. And I know that's not enough. But I needed you to hear me say it. Jack looked at Rook for a long moment. Then he sat down. Just sat down in the armchair by the wood stove, like the standing had become too much. Like something had shifted in the room and the weight of the moment had redistributed in a way that let him rest. He put his face in his hands. Nobody spoke. The wood stove ticked. The wind worked at the windows. After a long moment, Jack looked up. His face was composed again, not shut, not the way it had been when he opened the door, but composed. The face of someone who has let something through and is now deciding what comes next. The Harley's in the garage, he said. Hasn't run in 2 years. He wasn't saying it as a conversation point. He was saying it the way you say a thing that means something else, that carries the weight of something you don't even know how to say directly. Grim looked at him. I know, he said. Not I know about the bike, just I know. Carol used to say I was more myself on that bike than anywhere else, Jack said. He was looking at the floor. She used to say when I came back from a ride, I'd walk through the door and I'd just be lighter, like the road took something from me. The bad weight. A pause. I haven't felt light in a long time. Then we need to get you back on it, Stone said. Jack looked at him. I mean it, Stone said. Not tonight, but let us come back, Jack. Let us help you get it running. That's all I'm asking. Just that. Jack studied him, long enough that Stone held his breath without quite realizing he was doing it. You're serious, Jack said. Dead serious, Stone said. Another silence, different from all the ones before it, smaller, more careful, like something fragile was sitting in the middle of the room and everyone could feel it. Then Jack said, "The rear brake line's gone, probably the seals too. She's been sitting cold." Stone almost smiled. "I've rebuilt worse." "The carburetor is probably—" "Jack," Stone said, "I can fix it. That's what I'm saying. I can fix it." Jack looked at him for one more long moment, and then just barely the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, not yet, but something. "You always were the best wrench in the club," Jack said quietly. "Still am," Stone said. The tension in the room broke, not shattered, not dissolved, but shifted, like something massive had moved by 1 degree and changed the entire balance. Grim looked at Jack across the room. Jack looked back at him. "I'm not saying it's fixed," Jack said. "Tonight. Any of it. I'm not saying that." "I know," Grim said. "But you can come back," Jack said. "Tomorrow, if the storm clears." He looked at Stone. "And you can look at the bike." Stone nodded. "We'll be here." Jack looked back at Grim, and for a moment, just a moment, something passed between them that was older than anger, older than guilt, older than 15 years of silence. Something that had been there before any of it, back when they were younger men, and the road was still something that promised more than it had taken. "You should know," Jack said. "I'm not the same man." "Neither are we," Grim said. Jack absorbed that. "No," he said after a moment, "I don't suppose you are." He stood. He walked to the door. He opened it all the way this time, no chain, no hesitation. The cold poured in. "Storm's letting up a little," he said, looking at the sky. "You'll make it back to wherever you're staying." "There's a motel 6 miles back toward town," Dust said. "Crestview," Jack said. "Tell them Jack Morgan sent you. They'll give you the back rooms, quieter." "You know the owners?" Rook asked. "I know everybody around here," Jack said, something in his voice that was old and complicated. "I just don't see most of them much anymore." The 4 of them moved toward the door. Grim was last. He stopped on the threshold, the cold at his back, the warmth of the house behind him. Jack standing there with one hand on the doorframe. "We'll be here at 9, Grim said. Jack looked at him. "I'll have coffee on," he said, and he closed the door. They stood in the snow for a moment, the 4 of them not moving, not speaking. The wind had dropped a little and the storm was shifting, and overhead, somewhere above the clouds, there might have been stars. Stone was the first to speak. "He said yes," he said, like he needed to say it out loud to believe it. "He said come back," Dust said. "That's not the same thing." "It's closer than I thought we'd get tonight," Rook said. Grim was looking at the house. At the upstairs window, the light's still on. "He's still in there," Grim said. "Underneath all of it. He's still Jack." "Yeah," Stone said. "But he's right, Grim. He's not the same man." "None of us are," Grim said. He turned back to the bikes. He swung his leg over. "But some things don't change. You take a fall for your brothers, that means something. It meant something then. It still means something now." He looked at the others. "We'd owe him more than an apology. We owe him whatever he needs. You understand that?" They did. They all did. They started the bikes, 4 engines finding their voices one by one in the quiet of the Montana night, and they pulled out of the gravel drive and back onto Route 12 headlights, cutting through what remained of the storm. Behind them, through the curtain of the upstairs window, a shadow moved. Jack Morgan, watching them go. And for the first time and longer than he could remember, not entirely certain he wanted them to, he said he'd have coffee on. And he did. At 9 o'clock exactly, when Grim's fist came down on the front door, 3 knocks, same as the night before it opened, within 30 seconds. No chain this time. No deadbolt rattling through its hesitation. Just the door opening and Jack Morgan standing on the other side of it, with 2 mugs already in his hands and an expression that was not warm, not cold, but present. Awake, like a man who had spent the night deciding something and had arrived at a decision he wasn't entirely comfortable with, but intended to honor anyway. He handed Grim a mug without a word, looked past him at the other 3. "There's a pot on the stove," he said. "Help yourselves." That was the whole greeting. No small talk, no how'd you sleep, just coffee and a door held open, and the implicit permission to enter. Stone didn't wait to be told twice. They gathered in the kitchen, the four of them and Jack, and for a few minutes it was just the sounds of men who don't know how to start the conversation. They came to have doing things with their hands instead. Stone poured, Dustin found the sugar without asking. Rook stood by the window. Jack leaned against the counter and watched them move through his kitchen with an expression that Grim couldn't fully decipher. Something between discomfort and something older. Something that might, under different circumstances, have been the ghost of familiarity. Sleep, Grim asked. Some, Jack said, which meant no. Us either, Grim said. Jack looked at him. I figured. Another silence. But this one had less edge to it than the ones from the night before. The kind of silence that exists not because there's nothing to say, but because both sides are still finding the words. It was Jack who broke it. He set down his mug. He looked at Stone. You actually think you can get her running? Stone straightened immediately. This was language he understood, mechanical, specific, solvable. Depends on what you've got out there, he said. But yeah, I've brought back bikes in worse shape than anything that's just been sitting 2 years. It's been sitting 3, Jack said. Flat, correcting himself from the night before. Stone absorbed that. 3 years, he said. Still, if the engine's not seized. It's not seized, Jack said. I kept the cylinders oiled, even when He stopped. Even when I stopped riding, I kept up the basic maintenance. Couldn't quite let go of that. Something in that landed hard in the room. Grim heard it. The couldn't quite let go. The way Jack had kept his hands on that bike, even while every other door in his life was closing. Like the Harley was the last thing he'd hold on to before he let go of everything. Show me, Stone said. Jack looked at him for a moment, then pushed off the counter. Come on, he said, lying. The garage was cold. Jack unlocked the padlock and pulled the door up, and the smell hit them immediately, oil rubber metal, and something underneath it all that was harder to name. The particular smell of something that used to be alive and has been waiting. The Harley sat under a canvas cover in the center of the space. Jack walked to it and pulled the cover off in one practice motion, the canvas folding back to reveal the bike underneath. Stone made a sound, low, involuntary. It was beautiful even now. Even with dust on the chrome and the tires gone slightly soft, and 2 years, 3 years of stillness settled into it. A 2003 soft-tailed deluxe black and chrome with enough custom work on it to make it unmistakably personal. The kind of bike a man builds over years, not months. Jack Stone said quietly, she's in good shape. She should be, Jack said. Cost me enough. Stone crouched beside it, already running his hands along the frame, reading it the way a doctor reads a patient. His eyes moved fast and sure. Rear brake line you mentioned in. What else? Fuel petcock's probably sticky. Battery's dead for certain. The front fork seals I noticed a weep starting before I stopped riding. Could be worse by now. Jack rattled it off the way a man rattles off problems he's been cataloging alone for a long time in his head, with nowhere to put the list. That's it, Stone said. That's what I know of, Jack said. Give me 2 days, Stone said. He stood up and looked at Jack directly. 2 days and she'll run. Jack stared at him. You've got parts? I'll get parts. Stone pulled out his phone. Let me make some calls. Jack watched him step to the side of the garage and start dialing. Then he looked at the bike again. His expression had done something complicated, opened up slightly, in a way that made him look just briefly like a younger man. Like someone catching a glimpse of something he'd convinced himself was gone. Grim stepped up beside him. She's beautiful, Grim said. Carol picked the color, Jack said, quietly. I wanted something darker. She said black with chrome was classic, and I should stop trying to be interesting and just be right. A pause. She was right. She usually was, Grim said. Jack looked at him sideways. You didn't know her that well. I knew her well enough to know she was the best thing that ever happened to you, Grim said. And that she knew it and made sure you knew it, which made the two of you insufferable, and also genuinely the best couple any of us had ever seen. Something moved across Jack's face. Too fast and too private to name, but it moved. Yeah, Jack said, after a moment. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. They worked through the morning, Stone under the bike on his back on the cold garage floor, with a trouble light in a wrench in a commentary that ran almost continuously, not talking to anyone. Specifically just talking the way Stone always worked, narrating the process as he went. Jack stood nearby and watched. He didn't offer to help, not at first, but he answered when Stone asked questions, and gradually the answers started coming. With context, with history, that fitting's been giving me trouble since 2016. I put in a new one, but it never sat quite right, and gradually, without either of them acknowledging it, Jack had drifted from watching to crouching beside Stone, his own hands moving toward the problem. By noon, Jack Morgan was lying on the garage floor next to Gerald Briggs, both of them on their backs working the same problem from different angles. Dust saw it first. He caught Grimm's eye from across the garage and said nothing, just the smallest tilt of his chin in Jack and Stone's direction. Grimm looked, and something happened in his chest that he wasn't going to name out loud, but that he felt clearly enough relief. The particular relief of watching someone come back to themselves, watching the lights come on in a house that's been dark. Rook was less subtle. "Would you look at that?" he said just loud enough, and Stone's voice came back immediately from under the bike. "You going to stand there commenting, or are you going to hand me the 10mm? "Which one's the 10mm? Rook said. "The one that's not the 12 Genius." "Very helpful, Stone." "Rook, I swear to God." I'm kidding. Rook crouched and found the socket. "Here." An arm emerged from under the bike. Rook put the socket in the outstretched hand. The arm retreated. And from underneath, "Thank you. Was that so difficult?" And Jack laughed. It was short, more of an exhale than a laugh, really. But it was real and it was sudden. And it surprised him visibly the way laughter surprises people who haven't done it in a while, like a muscle firing that you forgot you had. Everyone heard it. Nobody pointed it out. But everyone heard it. Lily arrived at noon. She didn't knock. She had a key, and she let herself in the front and called out Dad, in the way of a person who has made this routine their responsibility and wears it lightly enough that it doesn't feel like a burden even though it is. Jack's voice came from the garage. "Out here." She pushed through the side door and stopped. 4 men she'd met once in a diner in a snowstorm 12 hours ago. Her father. On the floor of the garage, next to one of them, covered in grease up to the elbow, a wrench in his hand. She stood very still for a moment. Then she said, "I brought sandwiches." Stone's arm appeared from under the bike, thumb up. She set the bag down on the workbench and looked at her father. He was sitting up now, wiping his hands on a rag, and he looked at her with an expression she didn't see on him often. The expression of someone caught doing something they hadn't planned to do, but found they didn't regret. "They came back," he said, "unnecessary." She could see that, but he said it anyway, like the fact of it still surprised him. "I know," she said. "You called them," he said, not accusing, realizing. "I gave Grimm my number," she said. "Last night, in case I didn't call them. They came back on their own." Jack looked at Grimm, who had taken a sudden interest in the workbench. "Grimm." "She's not lying," Grimm said. "We said we'd come back. We came back. That's all." Jack looked at his daughter, then back at Grimm. Something was working in his face, gratitude and suspicion in almost equal measure, because that was what happened when you'd been alone long enough. Gratitude started to feel like a trap, like something you'd pay for later. "Eat something," Lily said firmly, changing the subject in the way only a daughter can, not deflecting, just redirecting with an authority that is entirely love. A song. They ate on the garage floor, which felt appropriate. Sandwiches from the diner. Lily had ordered them before her shift started and driven them out before going back. She stayed an hour. Long enough to eat, long enough to watch her father talk to these men with something approaching ease, long enough to say almost nothing but take in everything. Before she left, she pulled Grimm aside, out of earshot of the others. "He laughed," she said. "Yeah," Grimm said. "You don't understand," she said. "I haven't heard him laugh in—" She stopped, reset. "A long time." Grimm looked at her. "We're going to keep coming back," he said. "You should know that. I know it's just 2 days so far, but we're going to keep coming back." Lily studied him the same way she had in the diner, reading past the surface. "Why?" she said. Not skeptical, genuinely asking. "What changed? Why now after all this time?" Grimm was quiet for a moment. "Because your father stood in front of something for us," he said, "and we walked away and told ourselves the debt was paid, and the truth is it never was. It never is with something like that." He looked at the garage door. And because, he paused, because I'm 61 years old, and I don't have enough time left to keep carrying what I've been carrying. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Don't make promises, she said. Not yet. He can't handle promises. Just keep showing up. That I can do, Grim said. She left, and the work continued. It was late afternoon when the twist came. Stone had the carburetor rebuilt, the brake line, replaced the fork seals done. The battery was new, Dust had driven into town and back in 2 hours. The fuel system was clean. The tires were the only remaining problem, and they had ordered 2 from a shop in Billings that Stone knew due in the morning. Jack had worked alongside Stone for most of it, not just watching working. His hands had remembered themselves the way hands do when they return to something they learned deeply. There was a competence to the way he moved around the bike that was almost painful to observe because it was so clearly the competence of a man who should never have stopped. They were cleaning up when Stone stood from the workbench and said too casually, Hey Jack, I was thinking, when she's running, we should do the memorial ride together. Jack looked up. The annual, Stone said. We still do it, every year in March, for brothers we've lost. He paused. We do a pass by Carol's grave this year. It's already on the route. The garage went completely quiet. Grim looked at Stone. Stone, to his credit, held the look steady. He meant it. He wasn't being reckless. He'd calculated this in the careful, deliberate way Stone calculated things when they mattered. Jack had gone very still. Who decided that? He said. I did, Stone said. Just now. You can't just... Jack stopped. His jaw worked. You can't just add Carol to a club ride without... Why not, Stone said. She was a brother's wife. She raised a brother's kid. She held everything together while that brother was away. And she never once, not once, publicly blamed the people who put him there. His voice was steady, but the weight behind it was not. She deserves a ride, Jack. And you deserve to lead it. Jack looked at him. The color in his face had shifted. Don't do that, he said. His voice had gone rough. Don't use her too. I'm not using her for anything, Stone said. I'm saying she mattered. To us. She mattered to us too, even if we were too far gone in our own lives to show up when she needed it. And I'm tired of acting like she didn't. The silence in the garage was total. Jack turned away. He stood with his back to them, one hand on the Harley's frame. His shoulders were rigid, and then slowly they dropped. Not in defeat, in something more complicated than defeat. She would have liked this, he said. His voice was almost inaudible. All of you here, the noise, the arguing. A pause. She always said the house was too quiet. Nobody spoke. She used to say, he stopped, cleared his throat. She used to say that the road doesn't take people from you, it's the stopping that does it. When you stop moving, you start losing. His hand tightened on the frame. I stopped moving a long time ago. Grim crossed the garage in 4 steps and put his hand on Jack's shoulder. Not gently, the way you grip someone's shoulder when you want them to feel that you're real, that this is real, that you're not going anywhere. Then it's time to start moving again, Grim said. Jack didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. And then Rook said from behind them, his voice entirely unsteady, Jack, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. Jack turned. Something in Rook's voice made everyone look at him. Rook was standing with his hands open at his sides, which was the posture of a man who has decided to say the undefended thing. The thing with no armor around it. I was the one who told Grim not to reach out, Rook said. After you got out. After you came home. His voice didn't shake exactly, but it was close. I was 26 and I was scared, and I told Grim that reaching out would just tear open something that was trying to heal, that you needed space, that we should wait and let you come to us. He stopped. That was a lie. It wasn't about you. I was ashamed of what we'd let happen to you, and I didn't want to look at it. And I hid behind the idea that I was protecting you because it was easier than admitting I was protecting myself. The garage was a held breath. Jack looked at Rook for a long time. So long that Rook's hands hanging open at his sides started to tremble. I know, Jack said finally. Rook blinked. You what? I figured as much, Jack said. Not you specifically, but that was the reason. At some point I realized that people don't stay away because they're protecting you. They stay away because facing you is too hard. He looked at Rook without anger. with something more exhausting than anger. I don't blame you for being 26 and scared. I blame you for staying scared for 15 years. I know, Rook said. But you're here now, Jack said. Yeah, Rook said. Then stop looking at me like I'm going to hit you, Jack said. I'm not going to hit you. A beat. Probably. Stone exhaled so hard it was almost a laugh. Rook's eyes were wet, and he was clearly furious at himself about it, which under different circumstances might have been funny. He pressed the back of his hand against his face quickly and looked at the ceiling. Jack watched him, and something slowly, carefully, like a man reaching for something he'd told himself he no longer believed in, Jack reached out and grabbed Rook's arm. Hey, Jack said. I said stop. Rook looked at him. You're here, Jack said again. Firmer. That's what matters right now. You hear me? Rook nodded. He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded. And Jack held his arm for another moment, then let go. He turned back to the Harley. He put both hands on the frame the way a man holds something he loves and has missed. And he stood there for a long moment, not saying anything, just breathing. Then tires come in tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock, Stone said, his voice careful, recalibrating. Good, Jack said. Then she'll be running by noon. And the way he said it, she'll be running, was the sound of a door opening that had been closed for 3 years. Not all the way, not yet, but open. And for the men standing in that cold garage, it was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The tires came in at 8:15. Stone was already in the garage when the delivery truck pulled up, already had the rear wheel off the bike before the driver finished getting a signature. Jack came out 20 minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee, saw what Stone had done in the time it took him to get dressed and get the pot going, and stood in the garage doorway for a moment with an expression that was equal parts impressed and unsettled, the way you look when someone takes care of something you've been avoiding so long, it started to feel permanent. You didn't have to start without me, Jack said. Rear tire's already done, Stone said, not looking up. Hand me that torque wrench. Jack set down one of the mugs on the workbench, picked up the torque wrench, handed it over, and without any further discussion, got down on one knee beside Stone and started on the front. Grim arrived at 9 with Dust and Rook. Dust brought breakfast from the diner. Lily had packed it before her morning shift, a bag of biscuits and sausage gravy in a sealed container that was still hot. Nobody asked how she knew they'd be there. She just knew, because she was her father's daughter, and her father had always known where the people he cared about were going to be before they knew it themselves. They ate standing in the garage, biscuits in one hand, tools in the other, and by 10:30 the Harley was fully assembled. New tires, rebuilt carb, fresh brake lines front and rear, fork seals tight, battery charged overnight. Every fluid checked and topped or replaced. Stone wiped his hands on a rag and stood back and looked at it. Okay, he said, moment of truth. Jack stood beside him. He hadn't said much all morning. He'd worked steadily, efficiently, his hands moving with the remembered fluency of 30 years of mechanical instinct. But he'd been quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet, not closed off, not defensive, but internal. Like a man preparing himself for something he wants badly enough to be afraid of. You want to do it, Stone said. He held out the key. Jack looked at the key for a moment, then at the bike. Then he took it. He swung his leg over, settled into the seat, and the way he did it, the way his body found the position automatically, like water finding its level, made everyone in the garage go still. Because that was Jack Morgan on a Harley, and even after 3 years of stillness and 15 years of grief and everything in between, the fit was perfect. Like the bike had been waiting for exactly this. He put the key in, his hand went to the throttle. He looked straight ahead. Here we go, he said quietly, just to himself, or maybe to Carol. It was hard to tell. He kicked it. The engine turned over, hesitated, turned again, and caught. The sound that came out of that garage was enormous and alive, and it filled every inch of the space and went out the open door and across the property, and probably down Route 12 far enough to rattle a few windows. The Harley's voice, after 3 years of silence, was not diminished. It was not tentative. It was exactly what it had always been, loud and certain and completely itself. Jack sat on the bike while the engine ran, his hands on the bars, his eyes straight ahead, and his face did something that none of the 4 men watching him would ever be able to fully describe, but that all of them would remember until they died. It was not happiness exactly. It was more fundamental than happiness. It was recognition. The look of a man who has just heard his own name spoken after a very long time of no one saying it. Stone put his hand on Jack's shoulder. Didn't say anything, just put it there. Jack sat with the engine running for a full minute. Then he reached down and killed it. The silence after was different from the silence before. Fuller, like the garage was now occupied by something it hadn't been occupied by for a long time. He got off the bike. He stood and looked at it for a moment. Then he turned to Stone. "Thank you," Jack said. 2 words delivered with the directness and weight of a man who does not say them lightly and means them entirely. Stone nodded. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Thank me when you ride her." Jack looked at him. I'm not ready to." "I know," Stone said. "Not today, but soon." He held Jack's gaze. "You need to ride her, Jack. Not for us. For you. She doesn't mean anything sitting still." Jack looked at the bike for another moment. Something working in his jaw. Then, "Give me a few days," he said. "Deal," Stone said. "Mom." Those few days were not what any of them expected. Grimm had booked them at the Crestview Motel indefinitely, which for a man who had never in his adult life stayed anywhere more than 3 nights consecutively was its own kind of statement. The others hadn't questioned it. They just unpacked a little more thoroughly and stopped thinking of it as temporary. Every morning they went to Jack's. Not all of them every day, sometimes just 2, sometimes 3. They fell into a rotation without planning one the way people fall into rhythms when they're all orbiting the same thing. Stone was there every day without exception because Stone had decided that the bike was his project and his responsibility, and because though he would not have said this in words, being useful to Jack Morgan was something he needed for reasons that went beyond Jack. Dust came every other day and usually spent most of it in the kitchen. He cooked, which surprised everyone, including Dust, who hadn't cooked seriously in years, but turned out to remember how. He made things that took time: stews, roasted chicken, cornbread from scratch. Food that filled a house with smell and warmth, and the sense that someone was taking care of something. Jack ate more in those 3 days than Lily suspected he'd eaten in the previous 2 weeks, and she texted Grimm a single line: "Whatever Dust is cooking, tell him to keep doing it." Rook's visits were the most complicated. He and Jack had the unfinished business between them. Rook's confession in the garage had cracked something open that hadn't fully resolved itself yet, and both of them knew it. The first time Rook came alone, they spent most of the morning not talking about it, circling it through conversation about other things: the weather, the road, an old ride they'd done through Wyoming in 1998 that they'd both apparently remembered differently and had strong opinions about. Then over lunch, Dust's leftover chili reheated. Rook put down his spoon and said, "I need to know if you actually forgive me, or if you're just managing it." Jack looked at him across the table. "What's the difference?" "Managing it means you're tolerating me," Rook said. "Forgiving it means we're past it. And I need to know which one this is, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's fine and go home and find out later that you've just been getting through the visits." Jack was quiet for a moment. He picked up his spoon and took a bite of chili, set it down. "Forgiveness isn't a moment," he said finally. "It's not something I hand over and then it's done. It's a decision I make every time I think about it." He looked at Rook. "Right now I'm making it. Tomorrow I'll make it again. That's the best I've got." Rook absorbed that. "That's honest," he said. "That's all I know how to be anymore," Jack said. Rook nodded. He picked up his spoon. They finished lunch in a silence that was not comfortable exactly, but was real. And real between these two was already more than they'd had in 15 years. On Deso. Grimm came every day. He usually came in the evening after the others had gone, and he and Jack sat on the porch cold enough to need jackets, not cold enough to drive them inside, and talked. Not about the past mostly, about the present, about the club, what it was now versus what it had been, about Grimm's daughter in Denver, who he was also not good at staying in contact with, which Jack noted without mercy. About a project Grimm had been thinking about for 2 years, without acting on, involving outreach to club members who were struggling. Men lost in grief, addiction, depression. Men who had fallen into the same silence Jack had fallen into and had nobody positioned to pull them back. "You've been sitting on this for 2 years, Jack said on the 3rd evening. It was a statement, not a question. "Yeah," Grimm said. "Why, this time?" Grimm looked at the road. Because I didn't know how to start it without feeling like a hypocrite, he said, building a support system for struggling brothers when I couldn't manage to call the one brother who needed it most. Jack was quiet for a moment. So start it now, he said. Grim looked at him. You can't fix what already happened, Jack said. I've had 3 years of sitting still trying to fix what happened, and I can tell you it doesn't work. You just sit there and the thing stays broken and you get smaller. He looked at Grim. Build the thing. Build it so someone else's Jack Morgan doesn't spend 11 months in a hospital alone. His voice was very steady and very precise, and it landed with the full weight of what it cost him to say it. That's how you fix it, not by feeling bad about me, by making sure it doesn't happen to someone else. Grim didn't answer. He sat with it for a long time, the way you sit with something when it hits a place you've been protecting. Then he said, I'd want you involved. Jack turned to look at him. What? In building it, Grim said. I'd want you at the table. You've been on the other side of this. You know what it looks like from inside. That's not something any of us can replicate. He held Jack's gaze. You'd be the most important person in the room. Jack stared at him, and for a moment, just a moment, the ghost of the man he used to be moved across his face. The man who walked into rooms and filled them. The man who led rides and made decisions and was in Lily's words, someone her father used to be. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that, Jack said. You don't have to know now, Grim said. I'm just telling you it's there when you're ready. Jack looked at the road. Give me time, he said. We've got time, Grim said. We're not going anywhere. Jack looked at him sideways at that, quickly, like he was checking whether Grim meant it. And what he found in Grim's face, the absolute unperforming certainty of it, seemed to do something to him. Not dramatically, not visibly, but something. All right, Jack said, and looked back at the road. On the 5th day, Lily arrived in the morning and found her father in the garage on the Harley. Not riding, just sitting on it in the parked garage the same way she'd caught him, looking at it from the kitchen window in the months after her mother died. But different from those times. In those times, the looking had been the look of a man visiting something he'd left behind. This was different. This was a man sitting in something that still fit. She stood in the doorway and didn't say anything. Jack heard her. I know, he said. I didn't say anything, she said. You didn't have to, he said. He had both hands on the bars, looking forward. I'm thinking about taking her out. Lily's heart moved in her chest. She kept her voice entirely level. When today, he said. Maybe. Maybe, she said. Probably, he said. She leaned in the doorway with her arms folded, the way she'd seen her mother stand 1,000 times patient present. Not pushing. You want company? Not for the first one, he said. First one I need to do alone. She nodded. Okay. Don't make a thing of it, he said. I'm not making a thing of it, she said. You're standing there trying not to cry, he said. I'm standing here leaning in a doorway, she said, which is different. He looked over his shoulder at her then, and something passed between them, father and daughter, the specific and private language of two people who have held each other up for 3 years and know exactly how the other one works. Your mother would tell me to stop sitting here and go, he said. She absolutely would, Lily said. She'd probably say something worse than that. Jack almost smiled. Yeah. He turned back forward. She had a mouth on her when she thought I was being a coward. She did, Lily said. I learned from the best. He was quiet for a moment. Then he put the key in. Go back inside, he said. Why? Because when I start this bike and pull out of this garage, he said, I need to know someone is inside this house waiting, not watching, waiting. A pause, his voice had gone quieter. That's what she used to do. She'd go inside and put the kettle on, and when I came back, there'd be tea, and she'd say, how was it? And I'd say, good, and that was all I needed. Lily's throat was very tight. I'll put the kettle on, she said. Thank you, Ed, he said. She pushed off the door frame and walked back through the side door into the house. She filled the kettle, she put it on the burner, and she stood in the kitchen with her back to the window and listened. The engine caught on the first kick. She pressed her hands flat on the counter and breathed. The sound of the bike grew rolling out of the garage down the gravel drive to the road, and then the long, fading note of it moving away, getting smaller, becoming part of the distance. She stood there for a long time. The kettle started to steam. She turned the burner to low. She didn't cry until she heard it coming back. That was when the sound of the engine growing from the direction of Route 12 getting louder, turning up the gravel drive, rolling back into the garage, going quiet. That was when her eyes went. Because he came back. He went out and he came back. She heard the garage door, his boots on the side steps. The door. He walked into the kitchen. He was windburned and his eyes were bright in a way she hadn't seen in 3 years, and his hair was a disaster from the helmet, and he smelled like cold air and exhaust. And something she recognized from childhood, from being 5 years old and sitting in front of him on this exact bike, going what felt like 100 miles an hour. He sat down at the kitchen table. She poured the tea. She set it in front of him. He wrapped both hands around the mug. "How was it?" she said. He looked at the mug, then up at her. "Good," he said, and that was all either of them needed. She texted Grim from the hallway while her father finished his tea. He rode today. First time in 3 years. Grim's response came in under a minute. How'd he look when he came back? She thought about the windburn and the bright eyes and the way he'd sat down at the table like a man who had just remembered something essential about himself. Like Dad, she typed. Another pause. Then good. Tell him we're coming tomorrow. Tell him to be ready to ride with company. She looked at the message for a moment, then walked back into the kitchen. Grim says they're coming tomorrow, she said. He says to be ready to ride with company. Jack looked up from his tea. Something moved across his face, not surprise, not resistance. Something that was closer to the thing he'd felt in the garage with the engine running, that recognition, that hearing your own name feeling. All 4 of them, he said. All 4 of them, she said. He looked at his mug. He turned it once in his hands, and then slowly, carefully, like a man who is deciding to believe in something again, he nodded. Tell him to bring gas money, Jack said. I know a road that goes 100 miles before it sees another town, and I want to make sure nobody's running on empty. She was already smiling before she lifted the phone. She typed it exactly as he said it. Grim's response was 3 words. He's still Jack. They came at 8 in the morning, and Jack was already outside, not waiting on the porch, not watching from the window. Outside, standing beside the Harley, which he had rolled out of the garage himself, which meant he had been up before the sun, and he had made a decision before any of them arrived to witness it. The bike was running when they pulled up, low, idle, steady, patient, like it had never stopped. Grim cut his engine first. He sat for a moment, just taking it in. Jack Morgan outside, on his feet, next to a running Harley in the cold morning air. 63 years old and looking for the first time since they'd found him, like a man who had somewhere to be. You started without us, Grim said. I wanted to make sure she was warm, Jack said. Straightforward, no ceremony, like this was just another morning, just another ride, like the last 3 years had not happened. He was doing that deliberately. Grim could tell, keeping it ordinary on the surface so the weight of it didn't crush the moment before it could start. Grim got off his bike, he walked to Jack, and he did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He put both arms around the man, not a handshake, not a shoulder grip, an actual embrace, the kind that doesn't care who's watching, the kind that says everything the speaker cannot put into sentences. Jack went rigid for exactly 1 second. Then he put his arms around Grim and held on. Stone looked at Dust. Dust looked away. Rook pressed his lips together and found something important to study on his handlebars. When they stepped back, neither of them said anything about it. That was also deliberate. Where are we going? Stone asked. Jack looked at him. I know a road, he said. 100 miles, no towns, just the road. Same one you mentioned to Lily, Grim said. She told you. She texted me your exact words, Grim said. Bring gas money, 100 miles, nobody running on empty. Jack looked mildly betrayed. She's not supposed to relay my conversations. She's your daughter, Dust said. She relays whatever she thinks is important. Lord help me, Jack said, but the corner of his mouth moved. They rode. The road Jack chose was exactly what he'd promised, long and open and mostly empty. The kind of road that exists in Montana the way silence exists between notes of music, not as the absence of something, but as the thing itself. Jack rode point. Grim led him. Grim fell back behind his left shoulder, the way Jack used to ride behind his 30 years ago. And the formation rearranged itself naturally around the 2 of them, Stone and Dust and Rook falling into the familiar, Stagger 5 bikes moving as one thing, the sound of them together enormous and complete. For the first 20 miles, Jack just rode. No signal, no pace changes, just forward motion. Fast enough to feel it, but not reckless. The road unspooling under him, the cold air doing what cold air does to a rider, clarifying, stripping everything back to the essentials, the body and the bike, and the road and nothing else. Grim watched him from 2 bike lengths back. He watched the set of Jack's shoulders change. The first 10 miles they were high and held the tension of a man re-entering something after a long absence, muscles tight with the effort of remembering how to trust it. Then somewhere in the second 10 miles they dropped. Settled. The way shoulders settle when the body finally believes it's safe. That was the moment Grim had been waiting for. He pulled up alongside Jack, not passing, just leveling. Jack glanced at him. Grim didn't say anything. Just rode. Side by side. The way they used to on 100 roads in 100 different years when neither of them needed to say anything because the road was saying it for them. Jack looked forward again. And Grim saw it from the side, saw the thing happen in Jack's face that he'd seen described in Lily's text and heard suggested in Jack's voice over the past 5 days but hadn't seen directly until now. The openness, the loosening of something that had been clenched for a very long time. The road giving back what the stopping had taken. They rode for 2 hours without a break. When Jack finally signaled and pulled off at a wide shoulder overlooking a valley, they all followed engines going quiet one by one. Nobody spoke for a moment. The quiet of 5 engines stopping is different from ordinary quiet. It has texture depth, the ringing echo of something that was and now isn't. Jack got off the bike. He pulled off his helmet and just stood there looking out at the valley, the wind moving through his gray hair. His face was windburned and his eyes were wet at the edges, but that was the cold. That was definitely the cold. God, I miss this, he said, quietly. To the valley, maybe. To Carol, maybe. To no one in particular, and everyone at once. Nobody answered because there wasn't an answer. There was only the valley and the wind, and 5 men standing on a stretch of Montana highway, and that was enough. Stone came to stand beside him. Then Dust. Then Rook. Then Grim. All 5 of them in a line looking out at the same thing. You ever think about stopping? Jack said. To Grim specifically. Riding, getting old enough that the road just stops making sense. Every couple years, Grim said, and then I get on the bike and ride and the thought goes away, Grim said. Jack nodded. Yeah, he said. I think I forgot that. I think I convinced myself the thought was the truth and the riding was that the riding was just running away from things. Is there a difference sometimes? Stone said. Jack considered it seriously. I don't think so, he said. I think riding towards something and riding away from something feel the same from the seat. It's only after you stop that you figure out which one you were doing. He looked down at the bike. I was so afraid to get back on it. Afraid that if I rode it meant I was moving away from Carol, like staying still was staying close to her. Nobody filled the silence. They all understood it. But that's not right, is it? Jack said. It wasn't a question. He'd already worked it out. She's not in the stillness. She's not in that house, or in that garage, or in the chair I sit in every night. His voice was steady and careful, the voice of a man who has arrived at something true and is stating it precisely so it doesn't slip away. She's in the moving. She's in this. He gestured at the road, the valley, the 5 of them standing there. She used to say the road doesn't take people from you. I heard myself say that to Grim on the porch the other night, and I didn't even realize until I was lying in bed later that it was her line. Something she said to me years ago, and I stored it, and it came back like it was mine. He paused. Maybe it is mine now. Maybe that's how it works. Rook cleared his throat. Hard. Twice. Rook, Jack said. I'm fine, Rusuk said immediately. You're not fine, Jack said. I'm standing on a highway in Montana at 9 in the morning, Rook said. I'm fine. You've been crying since Billings, Dust said. That was the wind, Rook said with great dignity. Rook, Stone started. It was the wind, Rook said. Drop it. Jack looked at him for a moment. Then he walked over and grabbed Rook by the back of the neck, the way you grab a brother, a real one. Not gentle, but not rough either, and shook him once lightly. Stop it, Jack said. I told you, you're here, that's what matters. Rook put his hand over Jack's on his own neck for a second. Then Jack let go and stepped back, and that was the whole conversation. and somehow it was exactly enough. They rode back slowly. No urgency, no destination pressure. Just a long return, the road giving back miles in the same steady rhythm it had given them going out. Jack rode point the whole way, and somewhere in the last 30 miles he opened the throttle. Not dangerously, not recklessly, just fully. The way you ride when you've stopped holding back. The way you ride when you remember what the machine is actually for. Grim matched him. So did Stone and Dust and Rook. All 5 bikes opening up together on a long, straight stretch of Montana highway. The sound of them enormous and unified, the kind of sound that carries for miles. And for those few minutes, it was not 63 and 61 and 58 and all the weights those years carried. It was just riders on the road. Just brothers. Just the thing itself uncomplicated, alive. They got back to Jack's just after 11. Lily's car was in the drive. She was on the porch, a mug in her hands, and when she heard the bikes coming down Route 12, she stood up. She watched all 5 of them pull into the drive, the engines going quiet in their usual sequence. She watched her father take off his helmet. She watched him swing off the bike with the ease of a man who has done it 10,000 times and whose body has remembered that it knows how. He looked at her across the drive. "How was it?" she called. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said louder than he needed to, loud enough to make sure she heard, "Your mother was right." Lily's brow came together. "About what?" "About everything," Jack said, "but specifically the road. She was right about the road." Lily pressed her lips together hard. She usually was," she said. He agreed. He walked toward the porch. "Is there coffee?" "There's always coffee," she said. He climbed the porch steps. He stopped in front of her. He was taller than her by 6 inches, and the height differential was the same as it had been when she was a teenager, standing on this same porch with this same man. But something in the arrangement had shifted, was still shifting the balance between parent and child, redistributing itself the way it does when a child has become the one doing the holding for long enough that the parent finally starts to take some of the weight back. He put his hand on the side of her face, briefly, the way fathers do when words are insufficient and the gesture has to do the work. "Thank you," he said, for what she said. Her voice was very controlled. "For not giving up on me," he said. She looked up at him. "That was never an option," she said. He nodded. Then he went inside. She stood on the porch and looked at the 4 men now gathered in the drive helmets, in hands watching her with expressions that varied in their specifics, but shared the same basic quality, the look of people who have just witnessed something they are grateful they did not miss. "Thank you," she said to them. "All of them. Whatever you did in the last week, whatever came from that night in the diner, thank you." "He did it," Grim said. "We just showed up." "Showing up was everything," she said. Grim looked at her for a moment. "Your father used to say the same thing," he said. "Back in the day, somebody needed help. Somebody was struggling. Jack always said you don't have to have the answer. You just have to show up. The answer works itself out if enough people show up." He paused. "Took me 15 years to actually do it, but he was right then too." That afternoon, sitting around Jack's kitchen table with the remains of lunch spread out and the coffee pot making its 3rd round, Grim put his phone on the table and slid it toward Jack. On the screen was a document, simple header, Brothers Road Initiative Draft Framework. Jack looked at it. He didn't pick up the phone. He looked at it from where it sat, reading the first few lines. "You wrote this up," Jack said. "Last night," Grim said. "Couldn't sleep." "That's a recurring problem with you," Jack said. "Yeah," Grim said. "I've been told." He tapped the phone. "Read it." Jack picked it up. He read. The table went quiet, Stone and Dust and Rook finding reasons to be interested in their coffee cups, giving Jack the privacy of the reading without leaving the room. It took him about 4 minutes. He set the phone down. "You want to use my story," Jack said. "I want to build something in honor of Carol," Grim said. "And I want your name on it. Not as a poster story, as a co-founder." He held Jack's gaze. "You've been on the inside of this, the isolation, the grief, what it looks like when a brotherhood fails someone. Nobody can design a support system for that from the outside and get it right. You can get it right." Jack looked at the phone for a long moment. "It's a big thing," he said. "I know," Grim said. I'm still," he stopped, started over. "I'm not fixed, Grim. I want to be clear about that. Whatever happened this week, I'm not standing here telling you I'm healed. I'm telling you I'm moving again. That's different. I know that too, Grim said. I'm not asking for fixed. Fixed isn't real. I'm asking for moving. Someone who's moving and knows what it costs to start again. Jack looked at him. Then at Stone, who gave him one small, steady nod. Then at Dust, whose expression said, I made you 4 days of food. I think you know where I stand. Then at Rook, who was looking at the table, who had been quieter than usual all morning, who looked up at exactly the right moment and said nothing and needed to say nothing. Jack looked back at Grim. Carol's name on it, he said. Front and center, Grim said immediately. The Carol Morgan Foundation for Brothers in Grief, Jack said, trying the name out, hearing it in the room, seeing how it sat. It sat like something that had been waiting to exist. Done, Grim said. Jack was quiet for one more moment. Then he picked up his coffee. He held it the way he always held it, both hands wrapped around the warmth. He looked at the 4 men around his table. These 4 men who had found him in the back half of his life, who had pulled up outside his house in a snowstorm and knocked until he opened the door, who had gotten his bike running and fed him and ridden beside him on 100 miles of Montana road until his shoulders came down and his eyes came back. All right, Jack said, let's build it. The memorial ride happened 6 weeks later. March, like Stone had said, the annual run rerouted not secretly, not as a surprise, but by unanimous decision of the chapter, which had been told the story and had voted in the way organizations vote when the right thing is obvious quickly and without dissent. 43 riders showed up. Not 4, not the small, private thing any of them had imagined in those first days. Word had moved through the brotherhood the way word moves in tight communities, person to person, phone call by phone call, the story of Jack Morgan and what he'd given and what had been lost and what was being rebuilt, landing with each person who heard it with a particular weight, a recognition the way a story lands when it's also your story. 43 bikes lined up on Route 12 outside Jack's house on a cold March morning. Lily stood on the porch and watched them arrive one by one and could not have told you when exactly the tears started because it felt like they had been there all morning, just beneath the surface, waiting. Jack came out of the house in full gear helmet under his arm and stood at the top of the porch steps and looked at the road. At 43 bikes and 43 riders, at Grim at the front of the line, and Stone and Dust and Rook. At faces he recognized and faces he didn't, and faces he half recognized from 15 years ago. Older, now gray and lined but present. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked down the steps and swung his leg over the Softail Deluxe, the one Carol had picked the color for the one Stone had put back together piece by piece, and he put the key in and he started it. The whole line heard it, and one by one, 43 other engines answered. The sound was staggering. Lily pressed both hands against her mouth and let it be what it was. They rode to the cemetery in formation. 44 bikes, Jack at the front. The road gave way and the miles passed, and nobody spoke because there was nothing to say that the engines weren't already saying. At the cemetery gate, they cut the engines and walked in together, 44 men, to the section where Carol Ann Morgan had been buried 3 years ago on a March afternoon when her husband stood at the graveside alone. He did not stand alone today. He stood at the headstone with 43 men arranged behind him and his daughter beside him, her hand in his, and he stood there for a long time without speaking. Long enough that the only sound was wind through the cemetery trees. Long enough that everyone had time to understand why they were there and what it meant. Then Jack cleared his throat. He looked at the headstone. He spoke to it directly, which was not strange, which was in fact the only honest thing to do. I'm moving again, he said quietly. But the men behind him were close enough to hear, and the ones who couldn't hear felt the shape of it anyway. I know you'd say it took me long enough. You'd be right. He paused. I brought some people. Brothers. They were idiots for a long time, and so was I in my own way, but they came back, and I let them in, and here we are. He stopped. His jaw worked. I'm going to do something with what's left, something worth the years you gave me. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I think you'd recognize it when you saw it. Something that helps people. Something that makes sure nobody's alone the way I was. He reached out and touched the top of the headstone. One hand briefly. I'm not done. That's what I'm telling you. I know you always said the worst thing I could do was stop, so I'm not stopping." He stepped back. He turned around. 43 men and one daughter, all of them looking at him, and all of them holding something they couldn't put down. Some of them who had driven 5 hours to be here for a man they hadn't seen in 15 years, who had come because the story of Jack Morgan was in some specific and personal way also the story of themselves, of something sacrificed and not honored, of silence, that had gone on too long of a road they'd stepped off of and needed someone to help them find their way back to. Grim stepped forward. He put his hand on Jack's shoulder. The same grip as the garage, as the porch, as all the moments of the last 6 weeks that had added up quietly into something neither of them had expected to have again. "Ready," Grim said. Jack looked at him. He looked at the line of bikes visible through the cemetery gate, the chrome catching the March light. He looked at Lily, who nodded once small, certain her mother's nod exactly. He looked at Rook and Stone and Dust, his brothers, his broken, imperfect, present brothers. "Yeah," Jack said, "let's ride." And they did. All 44 of them back on the road, back in formation. Jack Morgan at the front where he belonged. Not because he was healed, not because the grief was gone, not because 15 years of silence could be undone in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years, but because he was moving, because the road was under him and his brothers were behind him, and Carol's name was already being written at the top of something that would outlast all of them. He rode forward. That was enough. That was everything. And the road, which had always been patient, which had always been there, which had never once gone anywhere, while he was standing still, opened up ahead of him like it always did, like it always would, like it was made for exactly this, a man who had every reason to stop choosing instead to ride.